Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people, Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. This reveals to us the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
It's a Christmas classic, a story written by Dr. Seuss of how the Grinch stole Christmas. As I'm sure you know, every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. Why, you ask? Perhaps, said Dr. Seuss, it could be that his head wasn't screwed on quite right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. The story, of course, is really about the Grinch not stealing Christmas at all. Oh yes, he stole the trees, the gifts, the food, the stockings, the lights, and the greenery. He took the popcorn, the plums, and every last drop of Who pudding. In fact, by the time the Grinch returned to his wickedly lonely home on top of the mountain overlooking Whoville, all he left behind was the snow, a few hooks on the wall, and a speck of food so small even the Whoville mouse turned up his nose. But much to his surprise, the Grinch left one thing behind. He somehow, some way, left Christmas in Whoville. For when the good folks of Whoville woke up on Christmas morning, they joined hands in the streets and sang their songs of Christmas, as if it didn't matter that the gifts were gone, that the food was missing, and that the decorations had been stolen. High on his mountain fortress, the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas perhaps means a little bit more. Without a doubt, Dr. Seuss is on the right track. Christmas means a great deal more than packages, boxes, and bags. Even means more than family gatherings and tables full of food. For Christmas makes the most remarkable, astonishing, wonderful claim in the history of humanity. God became flesh to dwell among us. Here's how author Max Lucado captures that reality. The idea that a virgin would be selected by God to bear himself The notion that God would don a scalp and toes and 2 eyes, the thought that the king of the universe would sneeze and burp and get bit by mosquitoes, it's too incredible, too revolutionary. We would never create such a Savior. We aren't that daring. When we create a Redeemer, we keep Him safely distant in His faraway castle. We allow Him only the briefest of encounters with us. We permit Him to swoop in and out with His sleigh before He becomes too real. We couldn't ask Him to take up residence in the midst of a contaminated people. In our wildest imaginings, we would not conjure up a king who becomes one of us. But God did. And that is one of the most controversial issues facing every human being. In fact, our lives, our future hangs in the balance on that question. Is the message of Christmas true? Is Jesus actually God in human form coming to live among us? You know, He claimed to be. Time and time again, Jesus equated Himself with God the Father. So we must make our choice. If you believe Jesus is who Christmas says He is, who He says He is, then you would be wise to center your life around Him. If He is not who He said He is, then He is someone to run away from. Listen to what C.S. Lewis had to say about the choice we all have to make. I'm trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about Him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept His claim to be God. That is the one thing we must not say. A man who said the sorts of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic on a level with the man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something worse. You can shut Him up for a fool, you can spit at Him and kill Him as a demon, or you can fall at His feet and call Him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about His being a great moral teacher. He has not left that open to us. He did not intend to. 2 choices. Either Jesus was some type of lunatic, or Jesus was God with us, King of kings and Lord of lords. You know, there's no doubt Herod believed the baby born in Bethlehem was anything but a potential lunatic. Now, I know that placing Herod in our sermon series this early in the Advent season, weeks before we arrive at Bethlehem's manger, may seem a bit unusual. I mean, after all, the wise men don't come upon the scene until well after Jesus is born. And as Kyle pointed out last week in his sermon, when God becomes real for Elizabeth. Now, if you happen to have missed that sermon, I sure hope that you'll go to our website and look it up and listen to it, because Kyle shared some profound insights that will inspire you and nurture growth in your faithfulness. But anyway, Kyle pointed out that Luke, after having read accounts that took place and listened to the stories circulating about Jesus and interviewing eyewitnesses of the events, put together an orderly account of all that transpired. Well, I want to confess this morning, I am not following that example. Not keeping the events in chronological order. But I'm jumping ahead in the story for good reason. As Herod sets the stage for the type of world God is wanting to save. And He offers us an opportunity to reflect upon the part of us that still needs some godly work. When the wise men following the star arrived in Jerusalem, They came before the ruler of Judea, King Herod, and they said, "Where is the one born king of the Jews?" The text tells us that Herod was disturbed, one of the great understatements of the Bible. For history tells us that this man was an unusually violent ruler. He killed many members of his court, killed members of his own family in order to ensure that his absolute power went unchallenged. A lunatic would be a joke to Herod, would not present a challenge to his throne. However, God coming in flesh, God being real, would present a tremendous challenge to Herod's personal power. Herod believed what the wise men told him about the baby of Bethlehem. God became real to Herod, and he reacted with violent rebellion, slaughtering all the baby boys under the age of 2 in Bethlehem in an attempt to keep God from becoming an imposition to him. In his book, Hidden Christmas, Timothy Keller writes, "The account of the bloodshed and injustice is all too familiar. Great evil is abroad in our world. However, when we ask where that evil comes from, controversy erupts. At one end of the spectrum, there are those who say the rich and the powerful are the ones to blame. This view of things tends to make the poor and minorities the heroes of the world's story. At the other end of the spectrum are those who insist that immoral and irresponsible people are the main problem. This tends to make hard-working, decent, middle-class people the heroes of the story, and both the shiftless poor and the immoral elites the villains. And though Herod was an unjust ruler, abusing his power, slaughtering the innocent, King Herod's reaction to Christ is a picture of us all. For the Bible reveals the truth that the source of the world's evil exists in every heart. That source of evil is called sin. That self-centeredness, self-righteousness, and self-absorption that dwells within every human heart. From the very time we are born, each of us wants the world to orbit around us and our desires. Each of us wants to be the captain of our own souls, the master of our own fate. And the truth is, only one person can sit on the throne of absolute authority in your life. So Jesus coming into the world as God with us is his claim to absolute authority, a summons to unconditional loyalty. And that tends to trigger deep resistance within the human heart, just as it did within the heart of Herod. Keller goes on to say, "Why do you think it is so hard to pray? Why do you think it is so hard to concentrate on the most glorious person possible? Why, when God answers a prayer, do you say, 'Oh, I will never forget this, Lord,' but soon you do anyway? How many times have you said, 'I will never do this again,' and 2 weeks later, you do it again? Why? Because there is a little of King Herod inside of you." That reality reminds me of the Apostle Paul's words in Romans. "I do not understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. Wretched man that I am, who will rescue me from this body of death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. Who will rescue me from the sin, from the Herod that is within me and at times leads me to do things, to say things that are anything but healthy, wholesome, life-giving? Things that can be very hurtful to others and to myself. Who will rescue me from sin? Christmas says God did the unimaginable. Because He loves you, God came into the world to dwell among us. Came as a baby who was named Jesus. Named Jesus because He will save His children from their sins. In the story of the Grinch that stole Christmas, the Grinch discovered Christmas was more than he originally thought that it was. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And then the true meaning of Christmas came through, and the Grinch found the strength of 10 Grinches plus 2. I think something like that happens in the real world. When we grasp that Christmas means God comes to be with us in Jesus Christ to save us from our sin, I think that our hearts grow. Grow with love and loyalty that invites Jesus to be the King of our lives, the Lord of our fate. And when the true meaning of Christmas comes through, I believe that we are given strength to overcome evil with the good works God has prepared for us to do. It is my prayer that this Christmas each of us will discover that Christmas doesn't come from the store, that Christmas is in fact a whole lot more.